This, in our lifetime, is the first event that's affected almost the entire world at the same time, where we're all in this together, is in fact a global phenomenon.
Professor David Forbes is a clinical psychologist and director of the Australian Centre for Post-Traumatic Mental Health. He says the current pandemic is affecting our mental health on two fronts. Is this pandemic akin to experiencing a trauma?
The pandemic's got a lot of similarities to what we'd see in a traumatic experience, in that how it fundamentally challenges the way that you thought the world was going to work. So, for example, after fires and floods, where people lose homes, they lose their jobs on the basis of sometimes whole communities being impacted by these events. And they're not dissimilar to secondary effects we see here in terms of the significant financial implications for people in relation to jobs, as well as the mental health impacts of the social distancing and isolation.
Because it's so unusual for us not to be in close proximity with others, to sort of share a hug or a handshake, isn't it, these days? We're so used to that.
Absolutely. And critically, we know that social connectedness and social support is the strongest predictor we have in terms of people's mental health and well-being after stresses or traumas more broadly. So for the current environment, it kind of hits at the heart in some respects of the thing that's kind of core to how we function and recover well under duress.
He says while the virus will eventually be eradicated, the psychological scars it will leave could be its most harmful legacy.
Changes to appetite, changes to sleep, finding a bit more withdrawn, a bit more irritable, an increase in use of substances, like often alcohol increase. And those kind of things aren't necessarily detectable, but you start to put them together. They're the early signs, and people can often not necessarily notice. There is a general sense that everybody's suffering. There is a general sense that this is a shared community experience, and that apprehension and some worry, some degree of feeling out of balance is occurring across the community more generally.
What about the people who are finding themselves newly vulnerable? You know, the ones who were living a comfortable lifestyle and overnight everything changed. They lost their jobs. They can't feed their families. It's become that desperate for many. What about them?
So certainly for those who are deeply impacted by the economic effects, we'd expect to see significant mental health responses and difficulties associated with that. The reality is a lot of people find themselves in extremely trying economic hardship at the moment. It's really important people don't feel like they've got to do that alone. Particularly people who might not have found themselves in these situations before. Really important, as these are unusual times, and as strongly as I possibly can, encouraging people to reach out for help, to get professional support, to get informal support from other family and friends, to be able to navigate it, both at a personal level, a social level, a skill and strategy level, and at a treatment level.
It's hard to see an end to this pandemic at the moment, but how lasting will the impact of mental health be on a community?
Events like these can have long tails. So, for example, it's not unusual to be able to see mental health effects kind of continue over the course of years, if not a decade. It depends, of course, on how deeply people have been affected and what's happened to them, either in terms of their exposure to the virus or the flow-on economic impacts. But we can see these things often go for quite a long time. We know that what happens is, over the course of time, as we move towards the end of what's at the moment an unimaginable end of this period, we know that people will start to pick themselves up, they'll start to move on with their lives, but there will be people who continue to suffer. And really important is that no one feels left behind in this.
Hello, I'm Sarah Abo. Thanks for watching. To keep up with the latest from 60 Minutes Australia, make sure you subscribe to our channel. You can also download the 9Now app for full episodes and other exclusive 60 Minutes content.